Hi, I'm Robin Roberts.
And I'm Diane Sawyer, and this is U.S. News.
Today we will be giving you an overview of the Korean War. It all started when the U.S. created a government, the Republic of Korea, South Korea, headed by Syngman Rhee. The Soviets oversaw the creation of a Communist Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, led by Kim Il-sung. The Korean War is considered a limited war because some dangerous weapons were restricted from being used. This picture shows the dividing line between North and South Korea, along with the 38th parallel and the capitals of the Koreas.
On June 25, 1950, the Korean War begins when 75,000 North Korean Communist Army crossed the 30th parallel and invaded non-communist South Korea. This invasion was the first military action of the Cold War. North Korea quickly overran South Korea, so the U.S. came to the South Korea's aid in July because they knew if they didn't, the Soviets would keep expanding communism. General Douglas MacArthur commanded the U.S. forces, which now hold off the North Korea at Pusan. The U.S. intervened as part of a police nation run by the UN Security Council. This picture demonstrates General Douglas MacArthur giving orders to his troops at Pusan. This battle would be the furthest the North Korean troops would advance in the war.
On July 5, 1950, the American troops fought a battle at Osan, which was the first engagement between the United States and North Korea. Task Force Smith was moved to Osan to delay advancing North Korean forces while U.S. troops arrived to form a strong defensive line. The U.S. were expecting an easy win, but was surprised to find out that the North Korean army is very well trained and is going to take much more to bring them down. Syngman Rhee's army forces were scared and willing to flee the battlefield in the middle of the battle. Jiang Jiechi offered his troops to help out South Korea and the U.S. In the beginning of the war, the Americans used more of a defensive strategy, while the North Koreans were offensive. But by the end of the summer, Truman and MacArthur decided they have to switch to more of an offensive tactic in order to be more successful. This picture shows the monument at Osan honoring the men of Task Force Smith who gave all they had. The task force held against an entire communist division for 7 hours.
Since the Americans switched strategies, they were much more successful. On September 15, 1950, General Douglas MacArthur leads an invasion into South Korea at the city of Incheon. This battle included 75,000 troops and 261 naval vessels, and the codename for this invasion was Operation Chromit. From there, the United Nations forces go to Seoul and take it back from North Korea. Then American troops headed towards the Yalu River, the border between North Korea and China. Just recently, China has become a democratic dictatorship and split the people into 4 classes, which is known as the People's Republic of China. Mao Zedong, the Chinese leader, was worried about protecting themselves, so he warned the U.S. to stay away from the Yalu boundary, or else they would get involved in the war. This is a picture of the United Nations invading at the Battle of Incheon. There are 4 tank ships that are being unloaded with equipment on Red Beach, where the American troops set up. The battle resulted in the United Nations being victorious.
Truman wanted to prevent going to war with China, but General MacArthur was willing to go to war. MacArthur sent a letter to Joseph Morgan, who was a House Republican leader who also wanted to go to war with China. MacArthur wanted him to leak the letter to the press, but once Truman found out, he fired MacArthur for insubordination. Once Truman hired new military leaders, they started to try to make peace with North Korea at Panmunjom. North Korea and South Korea both wanted to cease fire and maintain the 38th parallel as the boundary, but they couldn't agree whether prisoners of war are forcibly repatriated. This is a picture of Harry Truman, a man with smarts about war and how to keep our nation safe as well as others.
On November 4, 1950, Dwight Eisenhower was elected for president. He defeated Illinois Senator Adlai Stevenson to become president of the United States. During his campaign, Eisenhower said he would end the war in Korea. Later in November, the Battle of Chosin Reservoir was the fight to drive the United Nations out of Korea. This campaign was directed towards the 1st Marine Division of the U.S. and succeeded forcing the U.S. Corps back to South Korea. The Chinese didn't achieve their goal of destroying the 1st Marine Division. This is a picture of Dwight Eisenhower, the President of the United States after Truman. He was also the creator of the SEATO.
Another major battle that went on for almost a month was the Battle of Bloody Ridge that occurred in 1951. This battle was fought in the Korean mountain range where the opposing forces faced each other across a line that went through the middle of the Korean peninsula. The United Nations and the Communist forces fought in many small but intense and bloody battles, fighting for a position along the line. The North Koreans were able to continuously drive the United States back and exhaust them, while North Korea repeatedly conquered more positions along the line. Then the UN attacked the main ridge, which threatened to cut off any North Korean retreat, and they succeeded by the North Koreans abandoning the ridge. Also, later in that year, the Battle of the Imjin River occurred in April. In this battle, troops from the Chinese People's Volunteer Army attacked the United Nations at the Imjin River to try to recapture the South Korean capital, Seoul. This battle was a part of the Chinese Fifth Phase campaign to regain the initiative on the battlefield. The section where the battle took place was mostly guarded by British troops, where they were forced to retreat, but they were then able to prepare for defensive positions north of Seoul, where the UN forces stopped the Chinese troops.
The contest for Old Baldy became very heated on June 26, 1952. Almost 1,000 feet west of the crest, the Chinese had established positions that posed a constant threat to the 45th Division outpost. Chinese activity around Old Baldy increased. Mortar and artillery fire began to come in. They tripled multiple attacks after this, but failed and were forced to put it to an end. This map shows the location where Old Baldy occurred.
After 2 years of negotiating, North Korea and South Korea came to a truce and agreed to sign an armistice on July 27, 1953. The armistice stated that the prisoners of the war would be able to return to their home, but not all South Korean soldiers would return during the prisoner exchange, and North Korea still denies that they held South Korean POWs. Also, the armistice drew a new boundary line near the 38th parallel, giving South Korea an extra 1,500 miles and created a 2-mile demilitarized zone that still exists today.
This picture shows how the borderline between North and South Korea has changed, giving South Korea more land. It also shows how the Allied controlled South Korea.
Even though the Korean War was relatively short, many people died. In total, 5 million people died, and half of them were civilians. 40,000 Americans died, and more than 100,000 were wounded. A year after the war ended, Eisenhower put together an alliance to contain any communist aggression in Southeast Asia. John Foster Dulles forges an agreement establishing a military alliance that becomes the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. This picture is of John Foster Dulles with his quote, "The ability to get to that verge without getting into the war is the necessary of art. If you are scared to go to the brink, you are lost."
And that concludes the summary of the Korean War.
Thanks for watching and have a nice day.